Welcome to Mental Performance Unleashed with Emily Heird.
Hey everyone, welcome back to an all-new episode of Mental Performance Unleashed with Emily Heird. I am your host, Mike Leon. Emily here is a licensed psychotherapist and certified mental performance mastery coach who's been helping attorneys and high-performing professionals operate like cognitive athletes, performing at their best while preventing burnout. Today's episode, we're going to be tackling something that's very in Emily's wheelhouse here, which is something that a lot of lawyers won't say out loud. The resistance to actually go to therapy, because in the legal profession, there's a real stigma around seeking therapeutic help, concerns about bar fitness questions, partnership track implications, and just being seen as unable to kind of handle that pressure. There's also a deeper truth. Even when high performers do try therapy, it often doesn't address their actual performance challenges. Emily is not only uniquely positioned to have this conversation as both a licensed therapist and a performance coach, but she's going to break down why the standard go-to therapy advice misses the mark, what therapy can and can't solve for those high performers out there, and why mental performance training offers a completely different path forward, one without the stigma and with direct application to the work that you're actually doing. Emily, it's good to see you. I said a mouthful there, but you're going to break it all down for us. That's the beauty of this podcast. So I mentioned that you work a lot with attorneys and these high-performing performers, they've tried therapy. What do they usually tell you about why it didn't solve their performance challenges?
Yeah, it's good to see you again, Mike. So for the clients I have who have tried therapy in the past, even if it was successful, a lot of times I will hear things like the therapist didn't get the demands of work, or it was a basic, you need to manage your stress better. You need to take care of yourself better, or to say no more, to say no more, and to set better boundaries, which I don't see how that's possible in my work environment. So therapy provided some general insights, built a little bit of coping skills, helped them understand themselves better, but they still feel like they're drowning at work. And this isn't to say that all therapy is bad. Of course, I am a supporter of therapy. That is my background, mental health. But if you work in a high demand environment, you need to make sure that the therapist has a really good understanding of the environment that you work in and the demands that you are experiencing. And in fact, one psychologist that I was doing a networking call with, she was like, "Oh, you work with attorneys? That is one profession I will not work with," because she did not see how, their work and the demands of their work and the things that they wanted in their life, work-life balance. She didn't see how those two things were possible to have at the same time. So if the professional that you are going to doesn't see the possibility for how to make all of this work, then it's not going to be helpful, and it's going to feel like, you're hitting a wall with the therapist that you are working with, or they're not going to be able to help you with those specific work demands.
Emily, I mentioned the real stigma in the intro there around therapy with respect to the legal community. We've all seen these, videos, whether it be in movies of lawyers late at night eating Chinese food, almost burning themselves out, right? And if you're not a part of it, you're kind of seen as weak, right? How does the mental performance training bypass some of those barriers entirely?
Yeah, so this is a good conversation to have directly, because it does prevent people from reaching out to get help, and it keeps them stuck. I had one lawyer that I worked with that I remember he said, "I wish I would have found you 12 years ago." And so, I've worked with many lawyers from solo law to big law, from government to private practice, who are really struggling. But they are resistant to go into therapy because of this stigma. Not that they don't really believe in it, but because the professional risks feel too great. And the risks are real. We don't need to say it's all in their mind, because it's not. There are questions about mental health on the bar exam. In getting your license, there are questions about competency. I have to answer those same types of questions on my licensure renewal every year. They worry about confidentiality. They worry about the perception of what other people are going to think of them if they are going to therapy, if that gets leaked in any way, shape, or form. And a great example of the real risk of this is that, I had a client during COVID who was struggling with depression, not because of work, but because of the isolation during COVID. And so his work performance was suffering. And he had the courage to tell his partner, the partner, that, he was struggling a little bit because he had some difficult things going on. And the partner's response was, well, I've been through difficult things in my life and I've always gotten my effing work done. And then the lawyer was subsequently let go a couple weeks later because of this perception by the firm that he was then a liability. So I completely understand why lawyers are hesitant to seek therapy treatment or to ask for help at all. But mental performance training really sidesteps all of that because this doesn't have the clinical focus. There's no diagnosis, there's no medical records, there's no quote unquote treatment. There is nothing to disclose. However, it is still completely confidential. This is personal and professional development. So it kind of falls under the same category as executive coaching, leadership training. We're really optimizing your performance now. Your mental health absolutely improves because you are building the psychological skills for the demands of the environment. But we are not treating a medical issue or a clinical condition. We're talking about making sharper decisions under pressure, managing stress better, recovering from stress, building better systems, how to actually have stress management so that you aren't reaching for substances as a coping mechanism for stress. So it's not focused on diagnoses or treating symptoms like the medical model of therapy is. It is systematic training. And if you have been avoiding asking for help, then I just want you to know that there is another path.
Speaking of that, asking for help, what would you say for the lawyers, the professionals out there that are told you need to go to therapy, like when they're burning out and they're getting overwhelmed? Is that the wrong prescription, even though it's well-meaning in intention?
Yeah, so oftentimes when we hear, suggestions for improving well-being in the legal industry or, in HR departments and other industries, a common suggestion is to go to counseling if you're struggling, because oftentimes that feels like maybe the only resource. And oftentimes, firms and organizations have EAP programs that they can refer people to. But therapy is really designed to treat a series of symptoms to get people back to a baseline level of functioning, not really to optimize. And ultimately, when you are referring someone to therapy, you are saying, like, you have a mental health issue that needs treatment. And really, when I hear what my clients are describing, anxiety, overwhelm, stress, demotivation, it's not truly a mental health disorder. It is really a performance and systems issue. And the root of that is chronic stress from the workplace. If you go to therapy, again, you're running that risk of the therapist not being able to train you for the psychological skills that you need to meet the demands of that environment. And then it also kind of puts the responsibility, it makes that person, it makes that individual feel like there's something wrong with me. I can't cut it. I'm not able to meet the demands, is kind of a message that people can take away when the recommendation is for you to go to counseling. There's something wrong with you, the individual.
Right. So proactive versus reactive, right, type system there. Emily, let me ask you, staying on that proactive, reactive, and what you just described as well of what the therapist does versus what mental performance training does. Can you kind of give us some concrete examples for the listener or the viewer out there that of when someone actually needs therapy versus they need mental performance training? Where's that line?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So I would recommend therapy in situations where someone has like clinical depression. They're not just feeling down from work stress, but maybe it's kind of chronic and over time, and it feels like nothing they're doing is working and getting them back to a place where their mood is in a great place. Again, we have to remember, like with any mental health diagnosis, there is the line is really, is this impairing your ability to function? So clinical depression is one of those examples. If you're dealing with trauma that's impacting your daily life, therapy would be more appropriate. If you have levels of anxiety, I mean, we all experience anxiety. We're humans in a world that is filled with turmoil and uncertainty. But if you have anxiety that's present about everything, or you're worrying about the amount of time that you're worrying, or your anxiety is the anxiety is so intense, again, that is impairing your ability to function, therapy might be more appropriate. If you're struggling with significant addiction and substance dependence, therapy could be more appropriate. Thoughts of self-harm. And then there's a whole other category, which is like work is going pretty fantastic, but there are areas of life that need some attention and some professional assistance, like marital issues, grief, things like that.
Yeah.
I recommend mental performance training if you are highly capable but completely overwhelmed by the volume of demands at work. If you are anxious specifically about work, can I handle this? Am I good enough? What if I drop the ball? If you're anxious about being good at work and a good parent, that tension between work-life balance or integration. If you are not able to say no, you can't delegate, you can't protect your time, you're making poor decisions when you're tired or stressed. If you're working all the time, but you're still feeling behind. If you're successful, but completely exhausted and wondering how long this can continue. And then here's the thing, like most of us know, and most of my clients know that they should be doing things differently. They might even know what they should be doing differently, but they can't figure out how to actually change.
Yeah. It's one thing to know what you're doing wrong and then not actually implement it.
Right.
Can I ask you on that front, Emily, because like you said, I mentioned in the intro, you deal with all these lawyers and high performance individuals. These law firms, these businesses, they often recommend the individual go to therapy in a one-on-one setting. They don't really address like the performance system itself, right? What's the advantage, or have you seen an advantage of training an entire team or a firm in a mental performance, setting versus the individual one-on-one therapy approach?
Yeah. So if I go in and do workshops with a law firm, the benefits are everyone is getting the same training. They're learning the same tools, the same protocols, the same frameworks. So it's much like an athletic team speaking a common language around accountability, standards, excellence, recovery protocols, being able to recognize when someone is at capacity and they need recovery and not seeing that as laziness or someone not pulling their weight. So when you train everyone within the same frameworks, not only are you optimizing everyone's mental performance, you're reducing stress across the organization, you are enhancing engagement and well-being, clients are getting better results, business is booming. And so it all works together cohesively. Whereas if you send, lawyers, the professionals, the individuals, one off to therapy here and there, number one, you don't know exactly what the therapist is telling them or what they're teaching them or not. An individual might go to therapy one or two times or one time every couple months when they feel like they have time to do it, because therapy then also becomes kind of optional and something that I don't feel like I have time to do. Whereas if you are including mental performance training, then the whole organization is behind it, it's prioritized, and you dedicate the time for it. So you can address individual pieces here and there and kind of patchwork it, but you're going to get a much better return on the investment and the time investment of the individuals in the firm if you approach this psychological training much like athletic teams hire mental performance coaches for the entire organization.
Yeah. Emily, as we kind of put a bow here on this episode, for that high performer, that attorney that's listening, maybe they've tried therapy. They felt like it didn't quite fit given some of the things that you've kind of mentioned here. They're relating with it. What's the reframing that they should be doing to help them understand what they actually need?
Yeah, so I would think that the reframe is that you don't really need fixing, that you need some training, you need some skills that you weren't taught in law school or in your graduate school program. We can train our crafts, you can train your technical skills, you can train your body, but then you can also train your mind. And that is the piece of the puzzle that's missing for a lot of people. And that's what mental performance training can help with. This is the approach to help you build capacity. It's to help you improve your well-being and your mental health, but also to have a competitive edge at work. And so this is, I look at this as like it's personal and professional development. And on my website, I have a mental performance assessment that is free that you can go to www.vantageviewcoaching.com/assessment, and it takes about 10 minutes, fill it out, and it gives you a report on exactly where your strengths are from a mental performance perspective and what are some tailored recommendations for you to start training your mental performance.
Yeah. It's great stuff as always, Emily. I appreciate it, the time, the insights, breaking this all down for the audience.
Thank you, Mike.
That does it for us today on this installment of Mental Performance Unleashed with Emily Heird. We talked a little bit here about why therapy and mental performance training addresses the fundamentally different challenges, right? And why mental performance training offers high achievers a path to optimization without the stigma or barriers that come with traditional therapy. You heard Emily mention, but you can go to her website again, vantageviewcoaching.com/assessment. Take Emily's free mental performance assessment. It's going to take you about 10 minutes. It's going to show you exactly where your performance gaps are, completely separate from any clinical or therapeutic framework. Do me one more favor. In addition to going to vantageviewcoaching.com to connect with Emily, like, subscribe, leave a review, comment, share the episode with someone who needs to hear it. I'm Mike Leon. We'll see everybody next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.